The federal treasurer says the budget is $50 billion better off, but that doesn't mean the government's about to start spending. New Hope Coal posts a profit 12 times higher than last year. And why Joe Biden took a back seat at Queen Elizabeth II's funeral. It's Wednesday, the 21st of September, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. You've come down from the, celebrations, I shouldn't say that, the mourning period of the last 10 days.
Yeah, I'll tell you what really kind of struck me, Sean, to go from kind of Monday night with the funeral and the procession and everything after that. And then about halfway through the day yesterday, we get Treasurer Jim Chalmers having a press conference about budget deficits.
Yeah.
And suddenly you just realise life goes on, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not forgotten, but it kind of ends fairly quickly when there has been so much going on. And then suddenly after she was laid to rest, the world does go on. The media goes on, individuals go on, the royal family will go on. And it's kind of almost like a blunt end or something.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad way to put it. We'll talk more about Jim Chalmers in just a moment. I wanted to make a quick mention of the interview that we have coming up today, Sean. You're speaking with Kelly Morgan from a fascinating company, Dyson.
Yes, of vacuum cleaner and air filter fame. It's a bit of a different take for us here at Fear and Greed just to talk about a company. Now, Dyson is such an incredibly innovative company, and Kelly tells us all about it.
Yeah, it's a cracker. It's coming up a little bit later on. But the main story this morning, as I mentioned before, Sean, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers had some good economic news yesterday, saying the budget deficit will be almost $50 billion better than forecast last budget.
That's mostly the result of much higher tax intake thanks to higher commodity prices and plenty of people in jobs paying income tax and lower outlays due to reduced unemployment benefits and COVID payments. That's the good news. The bad news is that the improvement mostly reflects one-off factors, like high commodity prices. Dr. Chalmers also warned that many promises from last year will spill over into this year, which puts further pressure on the bottom line going forward. Of course, the promises last year were made by the previous government, so Dr. Chalmers was quite happy to lay the blame at their feet.
Now, we're about kind of 5 weeks out now from the government providing essentially a budget update. What's it going to be?
Well, Dr. Chalmers yesterday said it's going to be a bread and butter budget. I don't know what a bread and butter budget is.
It sounds quite plain, doesn't it?
It does sound plain. There's a bit of spending, about $5.5 billion in new or continued spending on things like money to extend COVID programs in aged and healthcare, also money for flood-related measures. There's likely to be more money for some of the election promises as well, but there's unlikely to be any major handouts or tax changes, at least this time around. Dr. Chalmers said the budget would be all about aged care, health and wages. Again, the Treasurer said this budget should be viewed as just one of a sequence of fiscal decisions to try and repair the budget.
And of course, one of our favourite topics, Sean, he had a fair bit to say about petrol prices.
Yes, in a week's time, the fuel excise will double, having been halved temporarily by the previous government because of COVID and the rising cost of living. That means petrol purchased next Wednesday night will jump by around 22.5 cents per litre. But Dr. Chalmers said the price shouldn't rise by that much immediately because of all the fuel in tanks underground, which was purchased at a lower price. I wonder whether that'll eventuate. I'm not so sure. He also said the competition watchdog and government will be keeping a close watch on exactly what happens at the Bowser.
I'll tell you what, I will be filling up before next Wednesday night, just in case.
Absolutely. Totally.
Now, just before we leave Dr. Chalmers, Sean, there's one thing I wanted to ask you about. He keeps pushing superannuation funds to invest in what he calls national priorities.
Yes, I always get really nervous around this. The Treasurer wants super funds to invest in areas including housing, renewables and other national priorities. Now, affordable housing seems to be his favourite topic. The super industry, of course, is worth $3.4 trillion. But my super is my money. It's not the government's money, it's my money. And I'd rather make the decision, or at least entrust my super fund to make the decision about how to invest it, rather than the government telling me where to put it. So it all sounds good to dip into that massive honey bucket of $3.4 trillion, but it's our money.
Yeah, well said. Even if you did have to invent a new term, honey bucket.
Yes, I know. In the midst of that, I'm thinking honey. It's honey pot, of course. Oh, and honey bucket. No idea why, Michael. Just move on.
I love honey buckets. Well, honey buckets are what you buy. You know how when you're driving through kind of country towns and you get the 1 kilo little bucket with the yellow lid, and it's about kind of $15 or something for a kilo. That is a honey bucket.
That is a honey bucket, so I wasn't wrong.
No, I think we stand by this. Honey bucket is Fear and Greed's new term. Now, local markets, how did we end yesterday?
The local market closed up 1.3% to 6,806 points, with some of the big caps performing really well. Michael, there was a sea of green.
Okay, yep, sea of red. We get a lot of sea of red. It's nice to have sea of green, and the sea is typically kind of a greeny blue, so go for it. Run with it.
Yeah, well, the big miners did well. So the energy companies, the banks, the retailers. CSL was really the only underperformer of the large caps. One notable stock yesterday was IDP Education. It will buy student placement agency Intake Education for about $83 million. Now, Intake has operations across Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Philippines, Thailand, Taiwan, India, and the UK. IDP will fund the acquisition using a combination of cash and debt facilities. There was so much good news in the share market. I thought I'd look at deposit rates instead, Michael. And there's good news there as well. Bond yields are rising in expectations of higher interest rates. That feeds through to term deposit rates. The highest ongoing savings rate has hit 4% for the first time since 2015, according to Rate City. Bank of Queensland yesterday increased its Future Saver account by 50 basis points to 4%, double the rate it was before the Reserve Bank started hiking interest rates back in May. Now, don't get too excited. The account is only available to people aged 14 to 35 for balances up to $50,000, but it's a start.
Yeah, it's a good start. What about international markets?
Well, the local market did well yesterday after Wall Street closed higher, with the broad-based S&P 500 index up 0.6%. The tech-heavy NASDAQ closed yesterday morning up 0.7%. US 10-year bond yields rose to a decade high of 3.48%, while 2-year yields jumped to 3.94%, a 15-year high. Why? Well, investors are expecting the US Federal Reserve to hike interest rates by another 75 basis points when it meets tonight Australian time. Oil prices are higher, while iron ore futures are also up just a touch. The Aussie dollar is trading back above 67 US cents.
All right, plenty happening. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, here's one I don't think we expected we'd be saying this time 12 months ago. New Hope Coal yesterday announced a profit of nearly $1 billion, 12 times the previous financial year, has really become the poster child for the energy sector.
And Chief Executive Rob Bishop says high thermal coal prices are likely to rise even more before falling. So profits this financial year could be even larger. The result, which was for the 12 months to the end of July, sent New Hope's share price up more than 7%. It's up more than 150% this year on the back of sky-high coal prices. Incredible. Amazingly, the huge jump in earnings came after an 8% fall in volume. Now, New Hope early last year was in trouble with big debts and operating on the wrong side of the climate change debate, but the Russian invasion of Ukraine, on top of a shortage of high-quality thermal coal, sent energy prices soaring, and along with other coal producers, New Hope has benefited. Its net profit of $983 million for the year is 3 times the company's previous record. The company will pay a massive 56 cents a share dividend. Also helping was a relatively weak Australian dollar. So coal is priced in US dollars, so when you sell a tonne of coal, it gets converted back into Australian dollars, and when the Aussie dollar's weak, it makes your bottom line look better. All in all, cracking 12 months for New Hope.
That is a big result. Now, Sean, big day for you yesterday. I know it's always the highlight of the month for you whenever the Reserve Bank board meeting minutes are released. And you kind of sifted through them yesterday, and the case for a slower pace of rate increases is becoming stronger.
It is. At the last meeting, the board talked about lifting interest rates by only 25 basis points, not the 50 basis points that they eventually did. The minutes said the size and timing of future interest rate increases will continue to be guided by incoming data and the board's assessment of the outlook for inflation in the labour market. Now, the board says it will keep moving on rates until price stability is attained. It also said, all else equal, members saw the case for a slower pace of increase in interest rates as becoming stronger as the level of the cash rate rises. It's kind of self-evident, but the fact that it's in the minutes really shows that the bank is thinking about slowing its pace of rate rises.
Sean, Fortescue Metals will spend $6.2 billion on renewable energy projects to save more than $1 billion in costs a year and hit its 2030 net zero emissions target.
Chair Andrew Forrest made the announcement at a CEO roundtable in New York as part of US President Joe Biden's First Movers Coalition and the United Nations Global Compact. Dr. Forrest said Fortescue would invest between 2024 and 2028, according to the Financial Review, though not more than 10% of earnings in any given year. The company estimates it will create cost savings of $3 billion by 2030, yielding returns on the new investment by 2034. Mr. Forrest also had a crack at Elon Musk for his criticism of hydrogen as a green energy. According to The Australian, Mr. Forrest said Mr. Musk was a good guy, but he has a business model which depends only on batteries, and hydro fuel cells harm that business model. Quote, he should get out and ask himself, am I really a climate avenger or just a businessman? If he knocks hydrogen, then we know he's just in it for the buck. Let's leave it at that.
Oh, goodness me. You can always rely on Andrew Forrest to deliver a good line, can't you?
Yeah, totally.
Now, how about this one, Sean? Australia is going to support a G7 plan to impose a price cap on Russian oil.
Yes, the G7 group of nations are proposing a cap which will limit Vladimir Putin's ability to fund the invasion of Ukraine. It would also ease pressure on the cost of living, of course. Australia has already banned imports of Russian oil, gas and refined petroleum products. It's kind of moral support. Of course, it's a global market, so it does have an impact. The idea is that nations combine to effectively intervene in the market for energy to stop prices of Russian goods rising. Jim Chalmers yesterday was all for it.
ACCC Deputy Chairman Delia Rickard has put business on notice, saying that companies making environmental and sustainability claims in their marketing need to be ready to substantiate them.
At the Sydney Morning Herald Sustainability Conference, Rickard said the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission is actively targeting greenwashing this year and looking for companies that make false or misleading claims which undermine consumer trust and confidence in the market. Ms. Rickard said the ACCC is hearing growing concerns that businesses are falsely promoting environmental or green credentials to capitalise on changing consumer preferences. The ASX has also announced its intention to crack down on those that claim to be green but whose claims can't be substantiated.
And Sean, just a quick update on the story from Dan Murphy's. It was offering a guaranteed on-the-spot 10-minute interview to anyone over the age of 18 who walked into the store wanting a job. And if you remember, this was actually going to be my backup if you guys punted me while I was overseas for a brief holiday.
I went for the interview myself, just in case.
The only one who didn't actually get a job out of it.
And I didn't get one. No, it's unusual because 1,000 other people did. So the whole plan was to fill their Christmas staff roster, and the liquor retailer found about 1,000 staff during the 1-week program, but it's still about 1,200 less than what they wanted. It just really highlights the challenge companies are facing at the moment when it comes to hiring people. Now, around half the stores nationally, this is half the Dan Murphy stores nationally, found more than 5 quality candidates that they moved through the process. So there you go.
Now, moving on to overseas news, Sean, and as we mentioned at the top of the show, after 10 days of mourning, the world is starting to get back to normal after Monday night's extraordinary funeral for Queen Elizabeth II. But one of the interesting stories I thought to emerge yesterday was the unusual seating arrangements for powerful people.
Yes, I thought it was really fascinating. One that made the news was US President Joe Biden being seated 14 rows from the front, well behind Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Protocols dictate that Commonwealth leaders outrank those from the rest of the world. Also, another good one, disgraced Spanish former King Juan Carlos, a distant cousin of the Queen, was invited, and he was sat close to his son, King Philippe. It's the first time the two have been photographed together in public since the King's exile. Overall, Governor-General's got the best seats, then the elected leaders of the Commonwealth, then the rest, including President Biden. And finally, the note on the flowers. In my household, there was lots of debate about that note on the top of the flowers.
Same here, because I was assuming that it was from King Charles, who has notoriously difficult handwriting to read.
Ah, right. I didn't know who it was from. Anyway, it was from King Charles, and it simply read, "In loving and devoted memory, Charles R."
Devoted. Gotcha. That was the word that we couldn't quite make out what it said. It was a bit of a mystery. Anyway, moving on to something very different. In the gaming world, so this is quite a jump. In the gaming world, there are very few things bigger than Grand Theft Auto. Everyone's probably heard of it. Well, a hacker has published pre-release footage from GTA 6.
The cache of videos includes an extensive and unauthorized look at the making of one of the biggest games in the industry. This is according to Bloomberg. A leak of this scale is so rare that some people actually doubted its authenticity, but apparently the videos are real. The footage provides an early and unpolished view of plans for Grand Theft Auto 6, though the final version probably will look a lot more refined. Now, Grand Theft Auto 6 has been in development in some form or other since 2014. Grand Theft Auto 5 was released in 2013, so this is almost a decade in the making. So the leaking was quite an event.
I don't really go in for conspiracy theories or anything, Sean, but if it's been in development for so long, it's a very good way to get it back into the headlines and help build a bit of hype, isn't it?
Oh, they wouldn't fool me. Don't be silly.
No, of course not. Of course not. And one last one for you, Sean. Chinese residents have been warned not to have skin-to-skin contact with foreigners so as to avoid getting monkeypox.
China reported its first case of the infectious disease on Friday, and the patient has been isolated, so the risk of an outbreak is low. But senior epidemiologists at the Chinese Centre for Disease Control and Prevention have recommended no skin contact with foreigners. Monkeypox has been diagnosed in more than 52,000 people so far from 102 countries. It's led to at least 18 deaths this year.
All right, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview, and today, Sean, you're speaking with Kelly Morgan from Dyson.
Yes, all about Dyson. This is the manufacturer of electrical goods. I think vacuum cleaners, but air filtration systems, all sorts of things. What I love about Dyson is just how innovative it is. And even the fact that the first developed Dyson vacuum cleaner, the bagless vacuum cleaner, is part of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. That's pretty cool in itself.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. It's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 21st of September, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.